Hey guys, Davey here. Before we dive into this conversation, I just want to let everyone know that Nothing is Wasted is coming to Indianapolis, which is such a weird thing to say because we're stationed here. We're headquartered here in Indianapolis. But what I mean by that is we're hosting the Healing Leader Roundtable for the first time in Indianapolis this March 6th. Now, the Healing Leader Roundtable is a one-day event for pastors, ministry leaders, lay leaders, counselors, therapists, nonprofit leaders, where we dive deeper into how to create environments where people can heal, environments that are biblically centered, spirit-filled, and trauma-informed. We think all three of those components are critical. You see, we found ourselves at a critical time in church history. Anxiety, depression, mental unhealth, it's at an all-time high. And unaddressed pain and trauma has the potential to paralyze the Big C church and its leaders more than anything else. And I'm telling you, we see it all over. As we're working with churches, as we're working with ministry leaders, the enemy is doing everything he can to leverage pain and trauma against the church. I mean, how many times have you seen people in your congregation or organization begin to get on mission and move into their purpose, and then something happens in their life? It knocks them off course. We'd love to invite you, if you're a pastor, a ministry leader, counselor, nonprofit leader, and your entire team, to a one-day roundtable event designed to equip you with a holistic approach to healing your organization, all the way from the leadership to the lay people. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by the pressing needs in your congregation or the emotional toll that it takes on you personally, we'd love to have you join us for this special event. You can find out more information and register at nothingiswasted.com/roundtable. Again, nothingiswasted.com/roundtable. But jump on this quick because there's an early bird rate that ends in the middle of February. Nothingiswasted.com/roundtable. Now, if you're not a ministry leader, I know we've got a lot of you guys podcast listeners here in Indianapolis. If you're not a ministry leader, but you would love your leadership to know about this, we'd love your help getting the information about this event to your pastor, to your church leadership, to your ministry leadership. Spread the word that Nothing is Wasted Ministries is bringing the Healing Leader Roundtable to Indianapolis March 6th. They can get more information at nothingiswasted.com/roundtable. We'll put the link right in the show notes. Now, don't delay. This is a special one-day event, and they often reach capacity. We've done these all over the country, and they usually sell out. So make sure you get this information to your pastor quickly, or if you're a pastor, make sure you jump on this before the early bird rate expires. Would love to see you, your church leadership, at this event so we can talk deeper into how to create environments inside the church where people can heal and get back on mission. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Nothing is Wasted podcast. My name is Davey. I'm one of your hosts, and I'm so glad that you're joining us this week for an incredible conversation where we have brought our friend Mark Vroegop back on the podcast. He was on the podcast on episode 99, so a long time ago, before we ever crested the 100 mark in podcast episodes. And we actually sat down in our recording studio in our previous home that we lived in back then, and did the conversation in person because Mark is a pastor here in Indianapolis at College Park Church, which is a large, thriving congregation here in the Indianapolis area. He's been there since 2008. Prior to that, he served as a senior pastor at Calvary Baptist Church in Holland, Michigan. He's a graduate of Cedarville University and Cornerstone Theological Seminary, where he got his MDiv. But he's got some award-winning works. I mean, one of them is Dark Clouds, Deep Mercy. Many of you guys, if you've been around grief, if you've been around the conversation of suffering, you've probably heard of this book or read this book, Dark Clouds, Deep Mercy, Discovering the Grace of Lament. And that was largely what our conversation was about back when we recorded episode 99. And, in fact, when you go, if you've gone and looked at Nothing is Wasted, the book on Amazon, they usually are sitting right there next to each other in a lot of the rankings and lists. And so it's really cool to see and kind of be there with such a profound seminal work that Mark has put together with Dark Clouds, Deep Mercy. But he's recently released, back in June of 2024, released a new book called Waiting Isn't a Waste: The Surprising Comfort of Trusting God in the Uncertainties of Life. And man, if this isn't a relevant and important conversation, especially for you guys, the Nothing is Wasted community, waiting isn't a waste. Sometimes we can think our waiting seasons are a waste. And man, this is an awesome conversation, an incredible book. We'll make sure that we put a link for how you can get the book in the show notes or right underneath this YouTube video. But before we step into the conversation, I want to invite you to a Zoom call that I do once a month called 5 Steps to Taking Back Your Story, no matter what you've gone through. So if you're new or if you're looking to take a next step in your healing journey, I want to invite you on this call. If you haven't yet been on this call, you need to take this step, because I'll do about 45 minutes to an hour of teaching where I walk through my own healing journey and the really pivotal 5 steps of my healing journey. And then how you can begin to take those steps. You'll find yourself on one of those steps, I believe, as you begin, as you're in your healing journey. I think it's really helpful to see where I'm at on the map and where am I going, and what does it look like? What kinds of questions do I need to be asking in order to move through this well and not just survive in the middle of this valley, but to thrive through it and beyond it. So 5 steps to taking back your story, no matter what you've gone through. It's a live Zoom call. It's not a webinar. So we do a Q&A at the end of it, and we connect you with a bunch of our resources that we have here at Nothing is Wasted Ministries to help you as you're going through your healing journey. That's what we want to do here. We want to meet you in your pain and provide a pathway through it. That is our mission, why we wake up every single day, to serve you in that way. And so when I invite you to that, nothingiswasted.com/start here is where you can register for the next Zoom call, nothingiswasted.com/start here. And I would love to have you on that next one. 5 steps to taking back your story, no matter what you've gone through. All right, let's go ahead and jump into my second conversation with Mark Vroegop. And I'm telling you, you're going to love this one. So here it is. Well, Pastor Mark, it's so great to have you back on the Nothing is Wasted podcast. You were here with us for episode 99, and you've done a bonus episode with us. I'm so excited to have you back joining us.
Dave, it's great to be back with you, man. A lot of life's happened between then and now, and good to have some conversations with you today.
Yeah, I have heard so many people talk about your book, Dark Clouds, Deep Mercy. I mean, I run into it a lot, and I'm like, hey, well, that's a friend of mine who pastors in India, and they're like, oh my gosh, that's crazy, and that's such a profound book. That's what we talked about last time that you were on. But you are releasing a new book called Waiting Isn't a Waste. And man, what an appropriate conversation for us to have on the Nothing is Wasted podcast. I know that's a pain point a lot of people deal with, is this season or interim space where they are waiting on God or waiting on something or waiting. And it can feel pressurized in those moments. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about just kind of personally, what drew you to want to write on this topic, talk about this topic. I mean, I know personally from what I know about you, this is something you marinate on for a long time, but before you actually put pen to paper.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote the book because I stink at waiting. I mean, sometimes you write books because you've got a long historical track record of figuring biblical principles out and how they work, and people write books as experts, and I love reading those books. Yeah, this book's not that. This book is me realizing over the last number of years that there's this spiritual formation gap in my life with how I handle moments when I don't know what's true about my life or I don't know what's going on. And I just started to lean into this subject, some of it providentially forced, some of it because I sensed a need to grow. And as I began to discover a few principles, I thought, I need to lean into this further, and wanted also to help other people along kind of in the journey, because it feels like so much of both my life, my personality, my ministry, drive, even quite frankly, my last name and family heritage, like they're all like pushing me to not like waiting. And yet the Bible has unbelievably helpful and hopeful statements about the promise of waiting on the Lord.
It's ironic. I made you wait on this interview because I was trying to wrap up another interview before that. So I think I was over here chuckling to myself when you were saying you have trouble waiting. But I'm the same way, and the whole cliche, don't pray for patience, because God's going to put you in situations where it's just going to grow your patience, and we know how that takes place. But the waiting is one thing. Waiting on God is another thing. I mean, it's a whole nother concept. And I'm just curious, as you have delved into Scripture, as you've been wrestling with this yourself, what does it actually mean to wait on God, and what are the implications of that in our life?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think one of the signature texts is in Isaiah 40, where it says that they who wait on the Lord will renew their strength. They'll mount up with wings like eagles. I mean, it's just a great text, right? They'll run and not grow weary. They'll walk and not faint. And just before making that statement, Isaiah also says, have you not known? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God. He is the creator of the ends of the earth. And so I think what biblical waiting is learning to live on what I know to be true about God when I don't know what's true about my life. So the idea is there's a gap in my life and my experience, and I can focus on what I don't know, what I'm trying to figure out, or questions like, why is this happening? And that's actually a divinely given moment for us to return to, wait, who is the Lord? How do I trust him? What do I know is true about him? And I actually think God creates those gaps because understanding who he is far more important, far more satisfying, far more essential than knowing what's true or what's going on in our lives. So I think waiting on the Lord is living on what we know to be true about God when we just don't know what's going on with our lives.
I love that you said sometimes God creates those gaps, and I think that flies in the face of sometimes the way we've constructed God in our Western American culture, almost like a vending machine God, that he's here to serve me, feed me, bless me when I need it, in the moment that I need it. And I think that's part of, obviously, the Amazon culture kind of creeping into our theology. But, why would, if you dig into that a little bit more, how do we reconcile God as a good heavenly Father who wants to give good gifts to his kids, and at the same time causes his kids to wait?
It's a great question, and it's a tough one because there are a lot of really good things that we would want, and they're not wrong. Like, they're really, really good things, and we want them even for right reasons. And yet God, in his infinite wisdom, withholds them or allows us to have to wait for those things that are good. And Davey, it's even built into the gospel. You've got Good Friday, and then a gap, and then Resurrection Sunday. I mean, God could have raised Jesus from the dead within hours or the next day, but no, his disciples are waiting with fear and trepidation. They think everything that they've believed is an absolute disaster. They've been duped, only then to realize, no, it's all true. And there's something about that dynamic that is really helpful for our spiritual growth. It's also helpful because imagine what we would be like if we got everything we wanted in the timing in which we wanted it. I mean, waiting is a reminder that we're just not in control of our lives. It's a reminder that God is sovereign over all things, and that we're not as central in the universe, and our expectations aren't as central as what we might want them to be. In the book, I give a quote from Betsy Childs Howard. I wish I had thought of this. She says, "You can't buy manna in bulk." And I just love that. Daily bread, daily grace, daily manna. God could have sent weeks worth of manna in one setting, but no, every day for a long period of time, Israel had to wake up, trust the Lord, get their food, go to bed, and then just do that over and over and over. Because I think there are things that God wants to teach us that are so more important than even the good things that we want, as good and right as they are.
It's so good. I struggle a little bit when it comes to the concept of trying to understand how do I know this is a season where I'm supposed to wait, and how do I know this is a season where I'm supposed to work? There's obviously both lanes in Scripture where clearly God's calling us to steward certain things. He's put things in our hands. He's called us to be obedient in certain things, take faith steps, take risks even on some level, right? Without faith, it's impossible to please God. But then on another level, I also am going, okay, is this a situation where I'm supposed to wait and let God fight this battle? Or is this a situation where I'm supposed to fight this battle,
Totally. And there's really no good answer to that. I mean, that's a really important and complicated question with lots of layers. I think we could start from a basic framework of realizing that waiting always needs to be part of our decision-making process. And that could be as simple as, hey, before I make this decision, I just want to take some time to wait on the Lord. It could be that God forces us into a season where our best laid efforts aren't being realized in a way that we would have thought or hoped. And I mean, I can think of lots of examples where that's happened to me, and I'm really frustrated in the moment, like what? Only to then a year or two or 5 years later go, whew, man, God saved me from my expectations. James uses the example of a farmer in James chapter 5, where he commends patience. And he says that the farmer plants and then has to wait for the latter rains. And I love that idea because farmers work hard. Like they work really hard and then they wait really intentionally. And there's nothing that a farmer can do to make plants grow. But there's a lot that he can do to toil the soil and or till the soil and plant the seed and be sure there's water, and yet at the same time there's always going to be a gap. He can't control a hailstorm. He can't control insect infestation. And so if in the book I say if you don't like waiting, you shouldn't be a farmer. I think it's true for what it means to be a follower of Jesus. I think waiting just needs to be in the back of our minds or in the forefront of our thinking. And the things that would make me most nervous is if somebody is never waiting or if they're not thinking about waiting. And then I think wrestling with the wisdom point of, is this a moment now where the Lord's inviting me to take action? And I think that's a tough answer, or a tough question, rather, that requires a lot of wisdom.
Hey friends, Davey Blackburn here. Just want to interrupt this conversation for just a second and let you know about a resource that we're really excited about. At Nothing is Wasted Ministries, we're always trying to provide resources for you, whether it's content or whether it's coaching, whether it's our courses, or maybe even books that are going to meet you in your pain and provide a pathway through it. And we've got a really exciting resource that we want to let you know about. It's one that's going to help you as you help little ones overcome fear, worry, sadness, and do it with faith-filled promises that are going to foster hope on the difficult days. Many of us are raising kids and we're trying to help our kids, all while we're trying to heal as well from painful experiences. And this resource is called When It Hurts by beloved author Emily Assell. It's a heartwarming board book for kids ages infant to 4, filled with Bible verse affirmations to comfort and guide little ones through tough times, whether they've had a difficult day or they feel scared or lonely or they miss someone special. No matter what, these inspiring words will remind them of God's love, care, and strength. Your kids are going to find comfort in the truth that it's okay to be sad, that they can tell God everything, and that God hears every prayer and they're not alone. When It Hurts provides a foundation of biblical truth to foster hope through life's challenges, and it features a variety of life-giving verses to remember God's promises every day. Now again, this board book is called When It Hurts. It's available now wherever books are sold, and we'd love for you to pick up a copy, maybe a few for some friends and family members who have little ones as they're walking them through difficult days. When It Hurts by Emily Assell, and we'll put the link for you to pick that up in the show notes or right here below this YouTube video. We've got a lot of people who are listening. They want to operate in God's ways, align themselves in God's rhythms, in a culture, in a society that doesn't at all seem to be lining up with God's rhythms. Again, like I said earlier, the Amazon phenomenon, the like one click, you get it now, overnight, sometimes even next day. We are rapidly moving toward this society where we can get everything, literally everything at our fingertips when we want it, everything from information to material goods. How do we operate in this society and be in the world, not of the world kind of thing, with this in the forefront, this concept of waiting on God and letting Him take care of some of these things for us? How do we reconcile those two things?
Yeah, it's a great question. The fact of the matter is that our society and culture is finding very creative ways and financially incentivized ways for people to wait less. So I think part of it is just realizing there's a wind that's blowing, there's a gravitational pull that is conditioning me to think that any kind of waiting in my life is bad. It shouldn't be tolerated. I should do whatever I can to minimize it. And just realizing that that's sort of the spirit of the age, I think it's really, really helpful. I think it's also important to seize the opportunities that when God puts us in a place that we're invited to wait or forced to wait, that we realize that we all kind of have these quick reactions or maybe ditches that we can fall into. And the ones most familiar for me are anger, anxiety, and apathy. I get mad, I overthink, and then I just quit. And I think realizing, okay, that's what's happening in the world. This is what tends to happen in me. Now, how do I take this moment and use it as a divine opportunity? And Psalm 25 and 27, both psalms that deal with the subject of waiting, they kind of walk us through a process where we change the focus from what do I don't know to what's true about God, to use it as an opportunity for worship, to seek his help, and then at the end to conclude, I can trust God in this gap. And I think if we can just deploy some biblical framework for some of those moments, we might be able to waste our waiting less. At least that's what I've experienced. I'm still bad at waiting. I don't like it, but I'm finding that I'm wasting it less because I'm using it instead of being so frustrated that its presence is so common in my life.
Yeah, I want you to lean in on that a little bit more because, Nothing is Wasted podcast. We often will talk about how God doesn't want to waste your pain, or he doesn't want to waste your transition, your trauma that you're going through, your season that you're in, but we can waste it. And there is a partnership that God's inviting us into to make sure that we don't waste this. His character and nature says, I'm not going to waste anything in your life. I'm going to use everything, the good, the bad, what the enemy means for evil. I'm going to turn it around for your good, for other people's good. But there is a cooperation there. And so what does it look like? You've already mentioned it a little bit, but, dig into that a little bit more. What does it look like for us, on one hand, to waste our waiting? And then what does it look like for us to not waste our waiting?
Yeah, wasting it for me is those 3 A's that I just mentioned, and there's probably a lot more. I think everyone needs to figure out what are my kind of go-to negative responses. And once you kind of identify those, it's really helpful, along with identifying kind of what our expectations are. Sometimes we have low-grade expectations, or maybe really intense expectations that then when we're not when they're not fulfilled in a way that we think, our waiting can get really problematic. So on the negative side, I think we tip towards anger, which is just simply my attempt to regain control by using emotion or strong action to try and force something to happen. Anxiety, I convince myself I can just think my way out of this problem. And, we have cell phones and internet access, so we have, now artificial intelligence. We can just ask any question we want to maybe try and figure out how can I get out of this scenario. And then I also, in pastoral ministry, and I can get to this point. It takes me a while, but I've run into a number of people who they just kind of quit. And they're just like, you know what, I just don't even care anymore. And they do care. We do care. But we're kind of doing a emotional self-protection. Where they've just kind of quietly quit, if you will. And I think understanding those ditches are really helpful because you can realize, oh, wait a minute, I'm allowing a negative and an ungodly or an unhelpful narrative to begin to take shape in my life. And we can then redirect it. And one of the things that I found to be super helpful is I've went and looked at all of the Lord is statements, particularly in the Psalms. So the Lord is my light, my salvation. The Lord is my stronghold. The Lord is my refuge. The Lord is my shepherd. And so what I'll do when I'm in that moment and I'm just tempted to go down a path of anger or particularly anxiety, I'll just begin rehearsing those, just reminding myself, no. I'm going to use this moment to remind myself, the Lord is my light, my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? And I just kind of roll through those as a reminder. This is what's true. Like I'm a Christian. I'm supposed to live on what I know is true that I can't see. Well, I know this is true. So So I think those are some practical ways. It doesn't make waiting easy, but it can transform it from something that's just miserable and, to your point, wasted, into something that I think God's able to meet us in those moments as we're drawing near to Him.
You know as well as anybody that their pain seems to be, or painful seasons are also accompanied by waiting seasons. And, I don't know if I don't think it's that God inflicts pain in our lives at all in order to get us to wait so that we're lean in on Him. However, He does use those seasons of pain and leverages them, like C.S. Lewis says, right? It becomes a megaphone to the world. Now we are on bated breath, like, God, what do you want from me? We're now desperate and listening to Him, and it's almost like He's like, okay, now I can download into you the things that you were too busy before or too distracted before to really get from me. I'm curious, in your own experience as you've pastored with people, we've got people who have listened to this, they've experienced some really just upending tragedy. They're in the moment right now where they're waiting for their life to be kind of put back together, and they're feeling a bit in despair. If you're sitting across having coffee with somebody and you're telling them, hey, this is a really sacred season right now, how would you encourage them in that time, kind of the aftermath of their tragedy or their upending crisis?
Yeah, for one, the Bible is full of language that sounds, I'm sure, very similar to what people think when they're going through seasons like that. And in that way, I think the Bible is uniquely helpful because it affirms, this is really hard. And doesn't mean God's abandoned you. It doesn't mean that you're a subpar Christian. It doesn't mean that you're ungodly. It means that you've had a lot of pain, and this is not easy. And so I have found one of my roles in the grief space and also kind of correlated to the idea of waiting is just encouraging people and sort of normalizing, hey, look, you're doing great. Like, you're still asking questions, you're still leaning in through your tears, you're trusting. Like, it's not an either or. It's not like I have no tears, so I trust. No, it's in your tears you trust. So like Psalm 69, I just love this. It says, I sink in deep mire where there is no foothold. I've come into deep waters. The floods sweep over me. I am weary with my crying out. My throat is parched. My eyes grow dim with waiting for my God. I mean, like, yes, wow. Like totally. And so I think just encouraging people in their journey, a lot of folks who are walking through pain just need to be reminded that they're going to make it. God's going to help them, and they're persevering through their difficulties. The other thing is at the right moment and the right time, and you need to be careful with this counsel, but just maybe encouraging them to go back and retrace the ways that previous waiting seasons have actually yielded really good fruit in their life. The Bible calls us to remember. So I talk about this in terms of mapping God's faithfulness, to go back and just look at a situation where you were called to wait. What was the scenario? What was the outcome? What were the things that you learned about God? And what principles or ideas might you pull from that scenario into this one? It's helpful because when you're waiting, it kind of gives you a bit of a myopic perspective, and we need to be able to sort of pull back and realize, wow, God's plan for my life usually involves waiting in a really painful way that yields really good fruit. And so it's assuring people, look, you're doing great, you're going to make it, God's working through this, just do the right next thing, and let's wait on Him together. In the meantime, you can ask the Lord for strength. Psalm 27 says, I believe that I will look upon the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. So wait for the Lord. And I love this. Let your heart take courage. The idea is God's got a book on His shelf called Courage, and you get to check it out and take it with you. I got the Courage book with me as you wait for the Lord. So I think those are some things that I've found to be helpful in my own life, and I'm sure there's a lot more that others could also find to encourage people in their waiting.
I love that. I've also found it's a lot easier to wait when you know the end, right? Or when you know the destination, when you're like, okay, well, I just have to wait until, next Monday at 3:00. And now, I can do that. I can endure that kind of waiting. It doesn't seem like that happens in our relationship with God hardly ever, right? It's like waiting in this indefinite period of time. And scripture says, hope deferred makes the heart grow sick. And that there can be a very real sickening of our heart or discouragement that takes place because we don't know, okay, when is this actually going to happen? If this is actually going to happen. I wonder what your thoughts are on that. Scripture talks a lot about long suffering, and how does that play into all of this when it comes to this waiting, when we don't know the outcome? We don't know when God is going to do what we believe he's going to do or what he's said that he's going to do.
That's a great question. And it's actually one of the most profound discoveries and one of the most profound moments over the last couple of years relates to this very question that you're asking, because I have had to really wrestle with my expectations of how I thought my life was going to turn out, or how long I expected something to take, or what the trajectory was going to be. In the book, I talk about the fact that while in the pandemic, I started meeting with a counselor and pastoral leadership development coach, and he asked me, hey, Mark, tell me what your expectations are for pastoral ministry. And I said, I don't have any expectations. And he, my wife was sitting with me on the Zoom call, and he started laughing. I'm like, look, dude, I know counseling well enough to know you're probably not supposed to laugh at your counselee's answers, but he started laughing, and then my wife started laughing, and then I was like, well, I guess this is kind of ridiculous. I started laughing, but I was absolutely convinced that I had no expectations. She's like, Mark, everybody has expectations. So name them. What are they? And I was like, well, man, maybe I do have expectations. What are they? So I started to name them. And it was remarkable how they were there. Like they were really informing how I thought about life. That was step one. Step two was encountering Psalm 40, which says, I waited patiently for the Lord. And, there's in the Hebrew, there's no word for patience. Patiently is a translation, correct, of the Hebrew. But in the original Hebrew, and this just blew me away, it's just I waited. And then the same word, Hebrew word kavah, is used in a different form. So put it this way, I kavod for the Lord. So I waited, and Eugene Peterson translates it as I waited and waited and waited for the Lord. And that helped me to understand, waiting patiently is simply waiting longer than what I would have expected. It's just wow. Instead of one wait, it's 3 or 4. And then step 3 is to realize, am I okay with that? Can I yield a expectation of a 1 kavah moment or a 1 wait moment when the Lord wants it to be 3? Am I good with that? Mm. And so that was really helpful for me I didn't realize even in pastoral ministry how my expectations were really driving a lot of my wasted waiting. And that was really liberating and really helpful and really traumatizing when counselors laughing at me at my ridiculous answer. And it was ridiculous. Who am I to think I don't have expectations? Of course I do. So,
right.
Yeah.
Right. That's hilarious. Wow. It's so true and so convicting. I mean, I love the fact that, there's other words like that where there actually is no Hebrew word, but we have an English translation. And I think I read in maybe Thou Shalt Prosper by Rabbi Daniel Lapin that if there's no Hebrew word for it, it doesn't really exist, right? It's like it's a human construct that was made up, And so this idea of like patiently, you could even take that to that theory there and go, there's just an assumption that we're gonna wait on God. It's not like we're gonna wait to an even greater degree, or we're gonna grow like a patient kind of muscle, but we're just gonna wait and wait and wait and wait, and trust that God's timing is perfect in all things. That's much easier said than it is done. But I love what you were talking about earlier about the mapping of God's faithfulness. And why would God, if I can look back and see how He's been faithful, Why would he bring me to this point right here only to leave
Right.
me?
Right.
And so waiting is not
Absolutely.
necessarily this idea that God has left me. It's that he's actually suspended whatever it is because of a purpose. There's a purpose for it.
Right. And it depends on who we think we are in our own story, right? If I mean, you're a parent, I'm a parent. I mean, helping our kids learn to wait is really important. And when they're young and immature and just have no sense of what's good for them, they would make really dangerous decisions if they didn't learn to wait. And so we have a responsibility to help our kids learn to wait. And so often I think of myself as the parent in my own story. Like, I know what's good for me. When the fact of the matter is I'm not my own parent. Like, I'm the child. God's the parent, and he's teaching me things. And one, I don't like learning lessons that are uncomfortable, and two, I'd rather think of myself as the parent in my own story, and that's just not true. I'm far more in need of development than I think what I'm comfortable with.
Hey guys, Davey here. Just want to interrupt this conversation for a second and make sure that you are aware of the fact that we've released our Nothing is Wasted video series and study guide. That's right, Nothing is Wasted video series and study guide that's based around the book Nothing is Wasted. There's a 6-session video-based study that includes everything you need to have deep and meaningful conversations around Nothing is Wasted, the book, and all of its themes: grief, loss, forgiveness, hope, and so much more. I mean, this is like a video series plus Bible study, plus you're going through the book. This is a really incredible and robust study that we've put together for you. When you order the Nothing is Wasted video series and study guide, you'll get access to 6 short videos that you can use as prompts for conversation with your small group or with your group of friends or with your coworkers or your book club or your church. Plus, you'll get the study guide that's full of helpful tips for organizing your group time, session questions, homework, Bible study prompts, ways to dive deeper into the material. And listen, while we believe this series is best done in community, you can grab it for yourself. You can do it on your own. You can just walk through it if you want to do a deep dive into what Scripture talks about, some of the themes that you see emerge in Nothing is Wasted, the book. Now, we know that each of us has stories of pain and heartache, and those stories leave us wondering where redemption can be found. Where is God in all of this? And that's why I wrote Nothing is Wasted, the book. I wanted you to see where God was showing up in my story, so you can start to see where God's showing up in your story. And I really do believe that with God, and often he uses other people, there's healing available to you right now, no matter what you're going through. And that as you start to read my story of my late wife Amanda and her story, you're going to hear that, and you're going to see that your story is one where God is crafting a redemption story. You'll begin to see your story in my story, and that's my hope. And you'll ultimately begin to realize that in your story, nothing is wasted. So you can purchase Nothing is Wasted, the video series and study guide right now. Go to nothingiswasted.com/book study. It is released. It is out. Again, nothingiswasted.com/book study. And we can't wait to hear how God is using this series to bring you and those in your life hope and healing. Well, I'm curious because of the unique position that you sit in as a leader of an organization. On some level, you do act as a parent or a leader in this role when you're trying to almost be a mediator when it comes to like collective waiting. I'm sure that there are situations, as you've led College Park and other organizations, where it's like, okay, we are trusting God for something, some big endeavor, some vision piece, capital campaign, building, planting a church, whatever it is, right? But it feels like God is suspending our time frame on this, and now you're going on your own front going, God, what are you doing right now? I thought that this was gonna, and then you're trying to convey this to people, and there's frustration, and there's lots of variables involved in all of that stuff, and there's so many different players at the table with this. How do you navigate that uniquely when it comes to like the collective waiting of God's people?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's really important, and it's really hard sometimes. It's important because you can get really good at just kind of pushing forward and getting stuff done, and no trust lessons with the Lord, no sense that He was the one that was behind it, and so I think building moments of waiting into both our planning and how we go about making even decisions, I think are really important. I think of meeting about 7 months or so ago with our directional team as we're thinking about how to shape words and language in order to capture where the church is going to be going for the next couple of years. And before we kind of got into it, we just stopped and had a extended time of just waiting on the Lord, realizing before we go into this, our best laid plans won't mean anything unless you're in them. And I don't mean just praying. I mean, there was a different posture of, Lord, just like bless our conversations. That wasn't what we were saying. We were saying, we want to wait upon you, and if you even want to slow down this conversation in order to do good things in us, we're on board with that from the beginning. Mm-hmm. So if this works in the next 2 hours, awesome. If not, we're gonna trust you. I can also think of some situations in church ministry where I was sure that there was an opportunity for us to be able to help advance the gospel and see people's lives change, and pushed forward on it, only to realize, whoa, it doesn't seem like the Lord is as in this as what I thought, or he's pivoting us. And in fact, we had some ideas of some things to do. We were talking about them in the fall of 2019, and quite frankly, if those things had materialized when we went into the pandemic, it would have been really bad. And so the Lord prevented us from taking steps forward. And at the time I was sad, I was troubled, I was frustrated. What did we miss? What did I miss? And yet I only saw part of the story. 3 months later, I was like, "Oh, thank you, Lord." So I think it's just having a little bit of more of a holistic perspective of, God's doing something, and just because I don't see exactly what he's doing doesn't mean that he's not doing something. I need to trust him in the gap moments. I've seen that to be really true when we're walking through grief, that I'm trusting God for my healing. I'm trusting that my pain isn't going to be wasted. I'm trusting that he's going to work out good things in this. What's interesting is I've tended to miss those lessons in the waiting because they're either not as intense, or it feels like I have more control over the waiting situations than what I do with grief. Grief is completely out of control, and there's a whole, you know all about that. But the waiting thing is, I actually could move these things along, but God hinders our plans and does that for our good.
Yeah, I resonate with that because, grief seasons, tragedy, trauma, those are so upending. It feels like your weakness is very obvious. You feel exposed. You're like, I can't do this, God. I need you to take this from me. But when often the waiting seasons, they don't always coincide. But for me, it feels like the waiting seasons have coincided with seasons that I felt strong. And I felt like I can do something about it. I can, just like what you were saying right there. And so it almost is like this whole other muscle that has to be exercised to go, I'm going to choose to limit the control I think I have in this situation, to choose to trust God and let him do this. Because after all, for all of our stories, what do we want? Do we really want to be the one that gets the credit for all of this? Or do we really want us to be able to go, man, God came through. Wow, what an incredible, let me tell you the story of that, of how God came through in this time. One question when it comes to really the collective waiting and really faith that is built collectively with a group of people. I love that you're in a position of pastoral leadership because you see this take place and you're shepherding people through this. There are some people, you can look back, you and I can look back and we can track and go, this is how God's been faithful. And so it really builds our faith to go, all right, let me just step back and take a deep breath and remember, God, you're going to come through here. Some people don't have that track record with God yet because they're so new in their faith, right? Or they don't have the eyes to see it yet. So it's important that they have other people to borrow faith from. Talk about that a little bit. Why is it important for us to foster that, to engender that in a collective group of people, a community, the body of Christ?
Yeah, it's important because our energy for waiting really leaks fast. And it doesn't take a lot for us to kind of go to a place where we get this kind of low-grade frustration, or we begin to kind of forget the power of what it is that we believe. I mean, that's why the gathering on Sunday morning is so essential. And I'm sure you've had this experience where, I'm singing a song, but I'm kind of not really into it, and just I'm thinking about other things. But then all of a sudden, either the people around me or some other brother or sister that I see worshiping, it snaps my attention, and I'm like, wow, they believe this, and I believe this too. And it's like this gravitational pull that's just really, really helpful. We remind ourselves of the power of the truths that are so central to what it means to be followers of Jesus. The other thing is, there are a lot of people who are waiting, and they may not be grieving, but they're struggling. And so to be around other believers who maybe understand that they're waiting and can encourage them in that wait, whether it's by their story or, I know there's a family that was walking through a really difficult foster to adopt situation, and just every Sunday when I'd see them, I'd give them a fist bump, and I'm like, you're gonna make it. Just do another week. You're gonna make it. And just a simple encouragement is really helpful, because you use the term, and I love it, to borrow faith from other people, or borrow encouragement. And waiting isn't something that we are meant to do just individually. We're all waiting. Every Christian is waiting on the return of Christ, and every Sunday is a gathering where we're reminded that here's what we do when we wait. And sometimes I think it's helpful just to kind of shrink our time horizon and be like, okay, so just wait another week and then come back, and let's sing together. Let's read God's word together. Let's hear God's a sermon together. Let's take the Lord's Supper together. So, and then let's do that again another 7 days. Like, that's our strategy. Let's just do that. And then let's do that 52 weeks out of a year, and as we wait for the Lord's return. So I think keeping it simple as well is really important. That sometimes we just need some time and some friends and some encouragement. God uses that to really help us persevere.
Yeah. Man. Well, I know this is very timely for so many people who are listening to this and watching this, and I would just really appreciate you speaking into this space, Pastor Mark. It's just been this has been an incredible conversation, and thank you for being gracious with your time. You could go back and listen to the other episode that we had Pastor Mark Vroegop on for episode 99. We talked about Dark Clouds, Deep Mercy, an incredible resource, especially if you're walking through some kind of grief and wanting to understand what it looks like to really lean into the Lord and lament. And then this one right here, Waiting Isn't a Waste, the surprising comfort of trusting God in the uncertainties of life. I want to highly recommend that you pick that up. We'll put links right here in the show notes, right below the YouTube YouTube video that you're watching right here. But Pastor Mark, thank you so much. Where can we follow what you're doing and get some more from you?
Well, our church's website, yourchurch.com, has 16 years worth of sermons, and even a couple sermons on waiting and things of that sort. And I also have a dysfunctional blog at markvroegop.com. When I say dysfunctional, it's because there should be a lot more material on there, but I'm a pastor first, I'm a blogger, website manager second. So that's there for any help that people would be looking for.
That's awesome. Well, thanks so much for spending time with us again on the Nothing Is Wasted podcast.
Yeah, David, thanks for having me on.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode of the Nothing Is Wasted podcast. We hope you enjoyed our conversation and found it as encouraging and insightful as we did. Now, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you like to listen, and leave us a rating and review. Your feedback helps us to connect to those who need these stories of hope and healing most, and to reach more listeners just like you. Also, subscribe to our Nothing Is Wasted Ministries YouTube channel. Now be sure to stay connected with us on social media. You can follow us at Nothing Is Wasted Ministries, follow me at Davey Blackburn, and follow Aubrey at AubSam. We'd love to interact with you, so be sure to stop by and let us know how these conversations are impacting you and your story. And if you want to learn more about all the incredible resources we have available to help you navigate whatever valley you're walking through, visit our website at nothingiswasted.com. If you're ready to get started in your journey towards healing and finding purpose in your pain, we'd love to help. Simply go to nothingiswasted.com/start here for your next step. Lastly, a big thank you to Sleeping at Last for providing all the music for the Nothing Is Wasted podcast. We want to thank our guests, and we want to thank you, our Nothing Is Wasted community, for tuning in regularly. Remember, no matter what challenges you face, whatever pain you are walking through, nothing is wasted. We'll see you next time for another incredible conversation here on the Nothing is Wasted podcast. But before you go, check out this short clip from our next episode. Thanks for joining us, friends.
And I felt God lately just, encouraged me to look at winter differently, because I don't like winter. I don't like being cold. He doesn't either. It's like,
Yeah.
But there's so much happening in that winter that is of value, and there can be joy in the winter too. And I felt even this winter of just him pointing out the beauty, like, look at the beauty, like, look at the trees right now, like, look at the snow, or look at the loveliness of what I'm doing, preparing under the surface, so much goodness for the springs. Like, there's value in it. There's joy in it. There's joy to be found. And that's what I love when Cub talks about contentedness. There is joy to be found in every season. Even if it's the hardest season, there's beauty in it. And some of our most beautiful moments, even in marriage, are when we're like crying together, and we look back on it, and we're crying, and we're holding each other, and God is with us, and there's this like peaceful, connected, intimate moment to it that has value. Like, we have marriage equity because of those moments. Like, there's something that is captured there that is so valuable, and we can be thankful for now.